Sean Patrick Maloney, the DCCC chair, in very embarrassing fashion, lost his race to represent New York's 17th district. Now, I've broken this down a bunch of times on this show. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely worthy of celebration. What Maloney did was he represented the 18th district of New York, which is where I live. And his district was redrawn, and turns out his house was then located in what was technically the new 17th district, which was Mondaire Jones's district that he was serving in. And so Maloney, rather than either move into the 18th or run in the 18th anyway, because it's not mandated by law that you live in the district that you rep, Maloney decided he would have an easier time winning the 17th than the newly drawn 18th. And so he decided he's going to run in the 17th. That forced Mondaire Jones out because Mondaire Jones was afraid to primary him because he's the DCCC chair. He controls the money. Right. So Mondaire Jones left. He ran in New York's 10th. He lost his primary, so that's it. He's done. He's out. All right. Maloney wins the New York 17th primary. Pat Ryan ran for Congress in the 19th district over the summer to fill the vacated seat that was left open by Antonio Delgado, who went to be lieutenant governor. Ryan won that race, serving in the 19th. So now you had a situation where Ryan was serving in the 19th, but running in the 18th in my district, and Josh Riley, a new recruit, ran in the 19th against Mark Molinaro. So, long story short, if Maloney didn't move, you would have Democrat incumbents running to defend the 17th, 18th, and the 19th. Because Maloney moved, you had no Democratic incumbents running in any of those three districts. And as it turns out, two of those three districts were lost by Democrats. Maloney lost, and Josh Riley lost in the 19th. So, especially how things turned out, it's especially scummy because the Democrats now are looking at almost holding the House in this midterm. They might only lose the House by a couple of seats, in which case it is on Maloney, the guy whose job it was to secure the House majority. It'll be his fault, like literally his fault, if they lose it. And so it was just extraordinarily selfish of him to do that. And he got bit in the ass for it because he lost his race. And what a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing to see.
Okay, yes. He well deserved it. Now, when we were doing our 8-hour live stream, God help us, I said the way the media is going to cover this, they are not going to talk about what he did. They're just going to avoid this subject. But it actually wound up being worse than that. There have been so far 2 rather lengthy articles talking about these House races and these losses that did not mention the fact that he knocked off Mondaire Jones and caused this whole musical chair shuffle that ultimately was the single biggest factor in these losses. They did whole analysis of specifically these House races without once talking about the fact that Maloney shifted districts. Now, this is an incredible real-time demonstration of manufacturing consent. When you wonder why the shit libs think of themselves as very informed, these people sit there with their fucking New York Times and they're always up on the latest Twitter trending topic, and they have no fucking idea what they're talking about. This is why. Because they are intentionally misinformed. To read these articles, you would have no idea that any of that happened with Maloney. You're going to walk away spouting the talking points. The Newsweek one really wanted to talk about crime, right? They actually gave the Republicans most of the analysis time in that one. Oh yeah, it's that crime. Mention nothing about what actually look, they're quoting Republican strategists. Now, this is manufacturing consent. I had a guy criticizing me about what I said about Fetterman's debate, who's telling me Fetterman's a regular guy. Where'd he get that from? He got that from the corporate media. Fetterman's not a regular guy. Fetterman grew up in a wealthy suburb. He went to Harvard. He's not a regular guy. That's an act that he puts on for the roops. But you would never know that to read corporate media. You would think he came out of a fucking steel mill. That is not the reality. If this is where you get your information from, Crystal Ball says this a lot. Often it's not, look, Captain Obvious is saying it. That's exactly what I was just going to say. Lies of omission. Very often it's not that they're actually presenting factually false information, although they do that too, particularly where war is concerned. It depends on how high the stakes are. It depends on how much the establishment is trying to push a counter narrative to reality. But more often it's this. What they wrote in those articles is not factually untrue, but it's grossly incomplete to the point of the main issue is not mentioned. The thing that should be the main meat of those articles literally is never touched upon in either one of these pieces. It's
which
amazing.
is all these issues aside, you had the advantage of incumbency and you forfeited it.
Right.
Because you got greedy and thought you'd have an easier time in the 17th district. And in the process, you forced Mondaire Jones out of the House altogether.
Right. You fucked an incumbent.
And by the way, Pat Ryan beat Colin Schmidt in the 18th. In the district that Maloney vacated, Pat Ryan beat Colin Schmidt by 0.8 of a point. So it was within a point of being a clean Republican sweep in all three of these districts.
Right.
All three. And we're talking about a year where the Republicans might only win the House by 2 or 3 seats when all the counting is done.
Right.
So this
and
could have been the whole ball game.
They're never going to write the article that John
Right.
Patrick Maloney is responsible for the Democrats losing the House. And most of your fucking party line, vote blue no matter who idiots are going to come away saying, well, it's those damn progressives and their cashless bail, you know.
Right.
They'll have no idea that this happened. And, in the end, I blame the media. I also blame them for being completely incurious, right? I mean, how many times does the New York Times, does the corporate media have to be completely disastrously fucking wrong for you to start thinking about looking into some other sources of information? It's not like the old days, man. You don't have to go down to Union Square and find a fucking shaky junkie passing out a pamphlet, man. On the internet, you can find some very credible news sources that will give you another narrative.
Well, the New York Times interviewed Maloney after his loss, and Maloney, who is a right-wing sort of, third-way Clinton-era Democrat, had some choice words for AOC, who endorsed Alessandra Biaggi, who ran against Maloney in that primary. And so, look, people who know us by now know that we are no AOC stands, so this is not meant as a defense of AOC so much as it is just an indication of what a bitter fucking loser and worm this guy is. So let's read this. So the interviewer asked, there is a debate in New York right now about the New York Democratic Party, and Representative AOC and some on the left are arguing its leadership is part of the problem here. Is that a conversation you are a part of? Well, shouldn't be anymore because he's on his way out. So I don't know it was not a great question.
Oh, he'll be part of that conversation and whatever fucking revolving door job.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They'll hook him up
for whatever
somehow.
favors he did for corporate donors.
Exactly. The last time I ran into AOC, he says, we were beating her endorsed candidate 2-1 in a primary, and I didn't see her 1 minute of these midterms helping our House majority. So I'm not sure what kind of advice she has, but I'm sure she'll be generous with it. But let's be clear, she had almost nothing to do with what turned out to be an historic defense of our majority. Didn't pay $1 of dues, didn't do anything for our frontline candidates except give them money when they didn't want it from her. There are other voices who should be heard, especially when suburban voters, have clearly rejected the ideas that she's most associated with, from defunding the police on down. She's an important voice in our politics. I love how he says that. He just trashes her for 3 paragraphs and then says she's an important voice in our politics, right? Now, look, what he's talking about here, and look, this is somewhat true, and I had a feeling that my neck of the woods was going to go for Zeldin. I thought Schmidt would run very, very close to Ryan, if not beat him outright, which he almost did. I had a feeling these seats were going to perhaps flip, and the reason is because a lot of people who live up here are people who used to live in the city And when they got some money, they decided they didn't want the city life. So they're a little more conservative, culturally speaking. They want their yard. They want their property, right? They always dreamed of getting out of the city and having a yard to maintain, right? And the idea of crime, like they're fucking paranoid about that. And they consume a lot of New York City media because we're within an hour of the city. So we get the Post up here, we get the Daily News, the New York Times. So they're bombarded with headlines about crime. He is right about that. Like, he's not wrong in saying that, yes, those anti-crime messages hit particularly hard right here. He is wrong in the sense that I don't think AOC has been screaming about defunding recently. I don't know about that. But anyway, she's an important voice in our politics. But when it comes to passing our agenda through Congress or standing our ground on the political battlefield, she was nowhere to be found.
Fuck that fucking parakeet.
Yeah, I agree, Paulie Walnuts. Fuck that fucking parakeet. I added that one for today.
Yeah, that's where AOC. The game that she's playing is a losing game. So on the one hand, she wants to all Mama Bear Pelosi, but these people are never going to accept you, and now you've alienated a lot of the people who put you in power. Now you're not even particularly liked by your own base, by people like me who volunteered for her. So what are you trying to do, man? I mean, you might as well just sell out completely or be a gadfly. Pick a lane. She's trying to have it both ways. And at this point, I don't know what she is other than an Instagram influencer. That's it. It's politician as Instagram influencer, but not in a meaningful way. In a fucking road decision manicure kind of way, in a very superficial way.
But it's hilarious that, like, yes, I mean, everything you said there is true. And yet the argument that he's making is that she didn't rep the Democratic agenda. It was the progressives who fought hardest for Build Back Better. Then they caved, as we knew they would in the end. But they were with that from day one. It was the moderates who sabotaged the agenda that 90% of the Democrats voted for. All right. That's point number one. Point number two.
Yeah. You notice AOC, how he doesn't mention Manchin or Cinema.
Right. No
how
mention
how about them as sabotaging the party?
Right. Exactly. No mention of them. Right. But number two, AOC could not and would not have done anything to sabotage the Democratic Party 10% of what Sean Patrick Maloney did by vacating his district. Like, that's right. Like, you're the one who sabotaged the party. He may have
single-handedly given the House to
you handed the Republicans 3 seats in a year where they might not win the House by 3 seats. You gave it to them because, look, despite what he's saying about all these issues, and I think he's right about these issues, but you know what? These issues did not only exist in the Hudson Valley region of New York. These issues existed almost everywhere throughout the country, and almost everywhere throughout the country, incumbents in this cycle were very difficult to knock off. And so you had 3 Democrat incumbents who could have held down the fort in these tough districts, and you fucked that all up by creating this musical chairs game, all because you thought that you could pull a few points ahead of where you were in the 18th by running in the 17th. And turned out that blew up in your face as well. So you got no argument here against AOC from that standpoint whatsoever. It's absurd. I mean, he's the last person who should be making any argument like this.
Right. To make an argument about AOC costing us seats.
Right.
Like, that's an abstract theoretical. You demonstrably cost at least 2 seats.
Right. Exactly. Right. Right. Exactly. That's just math. There's no theory involved in that.
But in the end, look, I mean, politician's gonna politician. I blame these fucking so-called journalists for not confronting.
Right, where was the follow-up there?
How the fuck do you literally interview the man and not ask him about, well, do you think changing districts had anything to do with this? How do you not ask that question? It's fucking stunning.
Please clap.